Imagine being the last person someone sees before they die, pulling the lever, pressing the button, or injecting the fatal dose. Hidden in the shadowy corners of the criminal justice system is a figure few know much about: the executioner. They are the final link in a chain that ends in death, carrying out society's darkest duty. Unlike murderers, their actions are legally sanctioned. But does that make it any less of a killing? Who are the people tasked with this grim responsibility, and how do they live with the weight of their role? In this video, we're pulling back the curtain on the life of the executioner, a figure shrouded in secrecy, tradition, and myth. Executioners don't act out of personal motive. They're not seeking revenge, power, or thrill. They're performing a duty sanctioned by the state. But does that really absolve them from the act of taking a life? What separates them from the killers they execute? The answer lies in the fine line between justice and murder. Murder, by legal definition, is the unlawful killing of a human being with malice aforethought. It's driven by personal motives: anger, greed, revenge. Execution, on the other hand, is viewed as a state-sanctioned punishment, delivered after a judicial process that is passed through trials, appeals, and years of deliberation. Executioners don't make the decision, they just carry it out. But while the law sees it as justice, the psychological impact tells another story. That's where things get complicated. Just because it's legal, does it feel any less like murder to those who pull the switch? So who ends up in this chilling role? In the US, the process of selecting executioners varies from state to state. Contrary to popular belief, there isn't a single national executioner traveling across the country like some dark, roving figure of death. Instead, the people who carry out executions are typically corrections officers, ordinary prison guards who volunteer or are quietly chosen for this grim responsibility. The selection process is discreet, as most executioners prefer to remain anonymous due to the emotional and societal weight of the role. Generally, there's a screening and interview process followed by specialized training, often lasting about 9 weeks. While these officers are trained for the task, they are not experts in execution. It is simply one of the many tasks they take on as part of their role in the prison system. Many officers do not actively seek this role. They find themselves in it as part of their normal duties. For some, it is simply an assignment that comes with a job, even if they never expect it to be involved in capital punishment. Imagine starting a career as a corrections officer, only to eventually be the final hand in ending someone's life. One reason prison staff take on this role is the absence of medical professionals. Participation in executions is widely condemned in the medical community, as it violates the ethical standards of the American Medical Association and the Hippocratic Oath. As a result, doctors and nurses are typically excluded, leaving corrections officers to manage the execution process. Executions are not the work of a single executioner, but rather a coordinated effort by a death team. This team includes individuals with specific tasks. One person pulls the switch for the electric chair, another presses the button to release chemicals during lethal injection, and a tie-down team straps down the condemned prisoner. At the center of the process is the prison warden, who oversees the entire operation and assigns each task to the members of the death team. Though some corrections officers may follow a traditional career path, the transition into becoming an executioner is often unexpected, placing them in a role they never imagined fulfilling. The common stereotype of a medieval or early modern executioner as a hooded figure dressed in black is largely a myth. Although popular in Hollywood, this image is rarely found in historical art or accounts from that period. In reality, executioners in pre-modern Europe were usually unmasked and often well known to the public. Hoods were worn only in rare cases when an executioner's identity needed to be concealed, such as during the execution of King Charles I of England. In that instance, the executioner wore a mask to avoid recognition, as no one had ever executed a king tried for treason before, and public outrage was enormous. Most notable European cities had resident executioners whose identities were widely known, making masks unnecessary. Like other professions, executioners had distinct costumes of office, which varied by country. These ranged from bright colors, often blood red, to somber black, and sometimes featured symbols such as swords or coats of arms that identified their profession. Despite their legally sanctioned role, executioners were often reviled and feared by the public, perceived as cold-blooded killers for hire. They were typically forced to live on the outskirts of society, often near slaughter yards or other unclean locations, because people refused to live near them. Though they played a vital role in the justice system, executioners were largely shunned and excluded from respectable society. But what about modern executioners? Do they remain anonymous? And do they wear caps or masks like you see in movies? The answer, most often, is yes to anonymity, but no to the masks. Modern executioners' identities are closely guarded, often known only to a select few within the prison system. In some states, they may be referred to only by a number, never by name, to protect them from public backlash or revenge from the families of the executed. Today, executions are carried out behind closed doors, with strict anonymity maintained through legal measures and physical separation from the public. Unlike the dramatic scenes portrayed in movies, where an executioner stands beside the condemned, pulling a switch as the prisoner writhes and screams, modern executions are far less theatrical. In reality, there is little for witnesses to see. By the time the curtain is drawn away from the viewing window, the condemned has already been fully prepared. The execution is administered quietly, and the prisoner's body soon goes limp. A physician then steps forward to confirm the death, and the curtain is promptly closed. The entire process is clinical and devoid of any dramatic flair. The image of a masked executioner is far removed from today's reality. Executions are now conducted with a focus on discretion, leaving little for the public eye to witness. But anonymity doesn't erase the mental toll. The psychological impact of being an executioner is profound, even if their identity is shielded from the public. Performing an execution is no simple task, mentally or emotionally. Imagine being responsible for ending a human life, even when it's someone condemned for horrific crimes. Many executioners struggle with the emotional burden, wrestling with guilt, anxiety, and a sense of moral conflict despite their legally sanctioned role. Studies show that the emotional isolation, combined with the moral weight of their duty, can lead to significant psychological distress. Executioners often experience what's known as moral injury, a deep internal conflict between their job and their personal ethics. In fact, 31% of prison staff involved in executions suffer from post-traumatic stress, exhibiting symptoms such as flashbacks and nightmares long after leaving the death chamber. The emotional toll can be so great that many executioners opt to leave the role after only a few executions. Interestingly, the most severe psychological strain often falls not on the executioner, but on the tie-down teams, the prison staff who physically secure the inmate before the execution. They are the ones who hear the screams, feel the struggle, and are in direct contact with the condemned. Executioners, by contrast, may never interact with the prisoner directly and are often not present until the final moments. To alleviate the psychological burden, many states employ systems to diffuse responsibility across multiple people during an execution. For example, in lethal injections, several buttons are pressed simultaneously, but only one releases the fatal chemicals. The control system is designed so that neither operator knows who administered the fatal dose. Similarly, in firing squads, only one gun is loaded with live ammunition, while the others fire blanks, ensuring that no one knows for certain who delivered the fatal shot. These measures are intended to reduce the emotional weight on any single individual. Despite these precautions, the burden of the role often leads to high turnover. Some prison systems offer counseling and support for those involved in executions, but the emotional toll remains heavy, leaving many to grapple with the weight of their actions long after the event. Moreover, executioners are not immune to the shifting societal debates on capital punishment, which can further complicate their feelings of duty versus morality. The role of the executioner is one of contradiction, legally sanctioned, but morally complicated, anonymous, yet essential. While society has moved on from the days of public executions, the figure of the executioner remains shrouded in mystery and burdened with responsibility. Their work is not seen as murder because they serve the state, But that doesn't mean they escape unscathed. In the end, they too carry the weight of life and death, just like the condemned. What are your thoughts on the death penalty? Do you think it serves justice, or is it an outdated practice? Let's discuss in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective on this challenging issue.